Hey. On Monday, we met Ruth, the manager that everybody wanted to work for. Today, let's dig into the science of why. Welcome back to Unshakable Her, helping ambitious women who are constantly second-guessing themselves to build the daily habits that compound into unshakable confidence. I'm Caroline Esterson, and I'm in your corner. Today, it's Wednesday, which means it's time for the science of what's holding you back. Because frankly, just believing yourself isn't going to get you the promotion, the pay rise, or the influence. But understanding what's actually happening in your head and why turns what's wrong with me into, that's what's happening. That's how unshakable confidence gets built. Let's go. So today you're going to learn the 4 ingredients of trust and which one most managers quietly skip. You'll understand why psychological safety isn't softness. It's actually the highest performance setting your team has. And you'll know the difference between compliance and commitment and how to tell by this afternoon which one you're actually getting. The science bit, because facts beat fear every time. The science tells us something very useful here. It says, genuine followership is a chemical, measurable, predictable response to 4 specific signals. Get the signals right and your team gives you discretionary effort. It's a big phrase, but essentially it's the gap between what they have to do and what they're capable of doing when they choose to tap into it. Get them wrong and they give you exactly what's in their job description, no more, and an updated CV in their bottom drawer, ready. Take a minute to think about your team, whether you lead one or not. Who in your team is giving discretionary effort and who is doing bare minimum? If you look, it's quite easy to see, isn't it? So let's look at these 4 signals one by one, and we'll start with trust. Meister, Green and Galford came out of consulting in the early 2000s and created a model that still holds on this. The model breaks trust into 4 parts. Credibility. Do you know what you're talking about? Reliability. Do you do what you said you'd do when you said you'd do it? Intimacy. Is it safe to tell you something important? And then you divide these 3 by self-orientation. Are you in this for yourself or for the work? Now, pause here a minute, because this one, self-orientation, is not just another ingredient, it's actually the multiplier. The other 3 are inputs. This one is the maths underneath that maths, and it can quietly cancel out everything else if you let it. Here's what I mean. You can be brilliant at your job, credibility, big tick. You can be as reliable as Greenwich Mean Time, tick. You can be safe to talk to, tick. But if your team can feel, and they can always feel it, that what is actually driving you is your own next move, those 3 ticks, well, they stop counting. The maths flip and trust collapses. And just to drive this point home, most managers don't fail at safe orientation by being awful. They fail at it by being scared, by being ambitious, or by being busy. By spending Tuesday mornings prepping for the meeting with their boss and Tuesday afternoons firefighting the thing the meeting created. And somewhere in between, they forgot that there are 8 people on their team who needed an answer from them 3 days ago. Their team is looking up at them. They're looking up at their boss. Nobody is looking at the work. That's how it goes wrong, quietly over months. So the real question is this. If your team had to describe anonymously what you actually orientate towards, would they say the work or would they say your own visibility? Sit with that for a second. Don't answer it out loud. Just notice what comes up for you. Because David Hurd, the manager I told you about on Monday, David's superpower wasn't that he wasn't ambitious. Of course he was ambitious. His superpower was that you couldn't feel his ambition sitting on top of yours. His ambition lived underneath his work for you, not on top of it. He knew at his core that his success was dependent on the team's success. That's the difference. That's the whole game, frankly. So I told you at the top of this episode that genuine followership is chemical. Time to make good on that by exploring the neuroscience of trust. Meet Paul Zak, an American neuroscientist who spent the last 20 years studying, of all things, what trust does inside the human body. And his research, which has now been replicated across over 40 countries, says something brilliant. When someone behaves in a way that signals, I trust you, things like they delegate something properly, they share information they didn't have to share, they back you publicly, your brain releases oxytocin, the same hormone you produce when you hug someone, when you breastfeed, when you fall in love, exactly the same one. Oxytocin doesn't just make you feel nice, it makes you measurably more trustworthy in return. It's a feedback loop. Trust generates trust biologically, which means the manager who trusts their team first, visibly, repeatedly, isn't being naive. They're triggering a chemical reaction that makes their team more reliable, more honest, and more invested. Trust isn't a leap of faith. It's a deposit that pays interest in oxytocin. Now, scale that up. Zach ran the numbers across hundreds of organizations. Workplaces with high trust cultures showed, check these numbers out, 76% more engagement, 50% higher productivity, 40% less burnout, 41% lower absenteeism, and 13% fewer sick days. Read that list again. Not one of those things is soft or fluffy. They are all line items on your P&L. Those are numbers your finance director really cares about. And they're produced chemically, measurably, predictably by managers who trust their teams first. So when someone tells you trust is a nice to have, or that this is all a bit touchy-feely for them, you have my permission to look them dead in the eye and say, 40% less burnout, 50% more productivity. Tell me again which bit of that is soft. Trust isn't a vibe. It's a measurable input that produces measurable outputs. And the manager who gets genuine followership is the one who goes first. Right. Now, having established the what of trust and the chemistry of trust, let's talk about the conditions trust needs to actually grow. Psychological safety. This is Amy Edmondson's work from Harvard Business School, and the research is 20 years deep at this point. Psychological safety is not, repeat, not being nice. It's not protecting people from challenge. It is the shared belief that on this team, you can say the awkward thing, ask the daft question, admit the mistake, and not be punished for it. When Google ran Project Aristotle, a multi-year study of what made their best teams best, they expected to find it was who was on the team, the smartest people, the most experienced, the highest performers. But it wasn't. The single biggest predictor of team performance was psychological safety. Not who, how. Because here's what happens in its absence. People don't stop having ideas. They stop sharing them. People don't stop noticing problems. They just stop reporting them. People don't stop disagreeing. They just disagree quietly. In the kitchen with the one colleague they trust. And the team goes slowly, expensively wrong while everyone smiles in the meeting. If you want to dig further into psychological safety, go to episode 14 for my interview with Gary Keogh, who's an expert in this field. And episode 15 is all about what happens when it's just not present. There are also support resources to these episodes, which I'll also reference in the show notes for this one. So before we move on, a reflection for you. When was the last time someone on your team told you something you genuinely didn't want to hear? Not a polite challenge, not a just plain devil's advocate, and not a carefully worded email at 6 p.m. with 3 softeners and a smiley face, an actual awkward, sat across from you piece of bad news or pushback. If you can think of one easily, recent, specific, named, then your team feels safe with you. That's brilliant. Protect that. It is rarer than you think. If you're scrolling back through the last 3 months and coming up empty, then you might have a bit of a problem and you could be running blind without realizing it. So, trust equation, neuroscience, psychological safety. We've covered the what of trust, the chemistry of trust, and the conditions trust needs to grow. There's one piece left, and it's the one that explains why some people give their work absolutely everything they've got, and others sat at the same desk, get paid the same money, working for the same manager, give just enough not to get fired. This is the difference between commitment and compliance, and it has a body of science behind it that is genuinely 40 years deep. Meet Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, two American psychologists. They started their work in the early 70s when most of psychology was still asking what punishments and rewards make people behave. Deci and Ryan asked a different question. They asked, what makes humans choose freely to do something well when no one's watching, when no one's measuring, and they don't have to? 40 years and hundreds of studies later, replicated across cultures, language, age groups, and industries, they had their answer. 3 things. That's it, 3. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Now, each of these gets misunderstood, so let me unpack them properly. Autonomy doesn't mean I do whatever I want. It doesn't mean no boss, no rules, no Tuesday morning meeting. Autonomy is about meaningful choice in how the work gets done, not what, how. Most managers think they're giving autonomy when they say, this is the goal, off you go. They're not. They're giving autonomy when they say, this is the goal and I trust you to figure out the route. I'm here if you need me. There's a big difference. The route is where the autonomy lives. If your manager controls the goal, the deadline, the methods, you don't have an autonomy. You have the list. Competence is the bit most people skip past. Listen carefully. Competence in this model is not being good at your job. That's static. Competence is the visible, felt experience of getting better at something. It's directional. You feel competent when this Tuesday you can do something you couldn't do last Tuesday. And the absence of this is one of the quietest career killers there is. The well-paid senior who's bored stiff, the high-performing manager who's plateaued for 3 years, they've stopped growing and the work has gone stale even though the salary hasn't. And now the third point, relatedness. Now, this isn't I get on with my colleagues. It's not about team lunches and a Slack channel for dog photos. It's more about if I disappeared from this job tomorrow, someone here would notice. They'd mind, not because the work would go undone, but because I'd be missed. And there's a tell for this. Ask yourself, at work, is there one person who knows what's actually going on in my life right now? 1. If the answer is no, well, that's a relatedness deficit and it's wearing you down without you even noticing. So get all 3, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and you get commitment, the thing your team chooses to give you that you cannot demand and you cannot pay for at any price. Lose any one of them and you get compliance, the thing your team has to give to keep their job. Commitment and compliance look almost identical for about 6 weeks. Both teams turn up, both teams hit deadlines, both teams sit through the same meetings, making roughly the same noises. You can't tell which one you've got from the organisational chart. You can't tell from the engagement survey. You can't tell from your one-to-ones because compliance is exceptionally good at performing in one-to-ones. You can only tell from what happens when you're not in the room. The compliance team does the task you ask for. The commitment team notices the task next door, the one nobody asked about, that nobody owns, that's quietly going wrong, and they fix that too. The compliance team stops at the boundary of the job description. The commitment team treats the job description as the floor, not the ceiling. Both are working, but only one is genuinely on your side. So before we move on, picture your team. Be honest. Are they committed? Or are they compliant? And maybe a harder question, if you're more honest still, which route did you put them on? Because the science is properly clear. Autonomy, competence and relatedness don't appear by accident. These are conditions a manager either creates or quietly suffocates every week without realising it. There was a lot of information in this science bit, and in the show notes you'll have a summary of the science and your action ideas. So if you're interested in developing this, you have your action plan. But let's get into action right here too. Here's the 2mm difference for this week. You don't need to overhaul your management style. You need to ask one question of your team. Really ask, then shut up. This question signals all 4 trust ingredients at once. Try this. What's something you're working around right now that you wish I'd just sought? Credibility, you're naming the real work. Reliability, they'll watch what you do next. Intimacy, you've made it safe to tell you. Low self-orientation, you've put yourself in the service of their day, not yours. 2mm changes everything downstream. Now, Friday, as usual, we have a song and 3 moves that build a team that actually wants to be there. Speak to you then. That's it for today. Before you go, if something in this episode made you think, that's why I do that, hit follow wherever you're listening, because that moment of recognition, that's where Unshakable starts. Remember, I'm in your corner. See you Friday.